The film opens with Tom Dolan, a highly skilled professional thief known as the In-N-Out Bandit. Over the past 6 years, Tom has pulled off 8 bank heists across various states, leaving no trace behind. The police are left with no leads on his identity. Tom frequently visits a storage facility where he stashes his stolen cash. The facility's receptionist is Annie Wilkins, a graduate student in psychology. As they interact more often, they develop a connection, and it's clear that Tom is attracted to her. After a year of dating, Tom suggests they take their relationship to the next level by purchasing a property and moving in together. Annie, who has endured the emotional strain of a divorce and a challenging past relationship, happily agrees, though she remains unaware of Tom's secret life as a notorious thief. Despite Tom Dolan's criminal history, he has fallen deeply in love with Annie and is determined to start an honest life with her. To make this change, he decides to turn himself in to the FBI. The morning after making this decision, Tom contacts the FBI and confesses that he is the In-N-Out Bandit, explaining that he has stolen over $9 million from 12 banks across 7 states. Tom speaks with Special Agent Sam Baker and proposes a deal. He will return all the stolen money in exchange for a reduced sentence, specifically requesting 2 years in a minimum security prison near the city, with full visitation rights. Tom's motivation is clear. He wants to prove to Annie that he is committed to an honest life with her. However, Baker is skeptical of Tom's confession. The FBI has received countless false confessions from people claiming to be the In-N-Out Bandit, so Baker doesn't take Tom seriously. He agrees to meet Tom at the Charleston Hotel the following day, but passes the case off to Special Agents John Nivens and Ramon Hall, assigning them the task of investigating the confession. 2 days go by with no response from the FBI, leaving Tom frustrated. He calls the FBI again and speaks with Agent Sean Mayers, who informs him that the case has been assigned to 2 capable agents before abruptly hanging up. Just as Tom ends the call, there's a knock at the door. He opens it to find Agents John Nivens and Ramon Hall, ready to hear his confession in person. Now in custody, Tom Dolan is asked by Special Agents John Nivens and Ramon Hall to provide details about his robberies to confirm his identity. Tom discloses that he targeted small-town banks with funds dating back to the 1950s. He explains that these banks had an adjacent empty building, which was essential for his operations as it allowed him to use a shared wall to access the vault. Tom also reveals that he carried out the robberies on Friday evenings, used gelatin to handle bolts and nuts, drilled into the vaults, and patched up the walls to cover his tracks. The agents insist that before considering any deal for a reduced sentence, they need to know the exact location of the stolen money. Tom provides the address of the storage unit where the cash is hidden and offers to accompany them, but Agent Ramon declines, taking the key from Tom and instructing him to stay at the hotel. As John and Ramon head to retrieve the money, John's demeanor changes. Sensing an opportunity for personal gain, he suggests to Ramon that they steal the money to pay off his mortgage and fund his children's education. Despite John's pressure, Ramon remains principled and refuses to go along with the plan. Meanwhile, Tom anxiously waits at the hotel when Annie unexpectedly arrives. Mistaking John and Ramon for Tom's old friends, due to their misleading behavior, Annie is pleased to hear that Tom plans to move into the house they had discussed. She then leaves to meet Tom at the hotel. At the same time, Myers informs Baker about Tom's confession, prompting Baker to suspect that no one has followed up on the case. John and Ramon decide to hide the money in an undisclosed location before returning to the hotel. When Annie arrives, John and Ramon confirm they found the money. John, now intent on eliminating Tom to cover his tracks, plans to kill him. Just as John is about to act, Tom reveals that only $3 million was recovered from the storage unit, with $6 million still unaccounted for. As John questions Tom about the missing funds, Baker arrives, shocked to see John's gun drawn. John decides to keep his plan secret and forces Ramon to let him in at gunpoint. A confrontation ensues and John kills Baker. Tom tries to intervene, but both he and John fall out of the window. Seeing Annie in shock, Tom urges her to run for safety. Tom and Annie are forced to flee together after John and Ramon open fire on them, but the two manage to escape. During the chase, John and Ramon realize that Tom has stolen Ramon's gun, complicating their pursuit. Bewildered by the chaos unfolding around her, Annie demands explanations from Tom. He promises to tell her everything once they are safe. As they find a hiding spot, Tom finally reveals the truth about his criminal past. He explains that he has never killed anyone nor spent any of the stolen money. His life of crime began after his father was unjustly fired and deprived of his pension by the company's CEO, who committed embezzlement. Unable to cope with the loss and his wife's death, Tom's father never sought justice. Tom turned to bank robbery as a form of revenge and to seek excitement. But meeting Annie made him reconsider his priorities. She became the reason he hadn't robbed any banks in the past year. Back at the Charleston Hotel, Myers mourns Baker's death and vows to find the killer. Meanwhile, Tom warns Annie that she could be implicated in Baker's death and urges her to leave town to avoid suspicion. John informs Myers about Baker's death and falsely accuses Tom of being the killer, also claiming they found nothing in the warehouse. Tom and Annie part ways as she boards a bus, with Tom promising they will meet again. Annie asks him to prove his innocence in Baker's death, and they share a heartfelt goodbye. The next morning, Myers, John, and Ramon review Tom's file and security footage that identifies Annie. They discuss her recent divorce, and Myers orders them to locate Tom. Annie calls Tom from the warehouse, informing him that CCTV footage shows John and Ramon removing boxes from his storage unit. She had returned to save the evidence from being erased. Tom urges her to leave immediately and calls 911 for police assistance, but decides to head to the storage facility himself. Just as Annie is about to leave her office, John arrives and demands to know where Tom hid the remaining $6 million. When she tries to escape, John assaults her and searches for the memory card containing the CCTV footage. Despite her attempts to defend herself with scissors, John knocks her unconscious. Ramon intervenes, convincing John to flee before Annie is discovered. Tom arrives at the storage facility, finds the injured Annie, and rushes her to the hospital, leaving quickly to avoid the police. While driving, he contacts the FBI and uses Myers to get in touch with John. Overhearing the conversation, John pretends not to know about Annie. Intrigued by the situation, Myers decides to visit Annie in the hospital. While Tom is on the street, a local police officer recognizes him and starts a chase. John and Ramon, having tracked Tom, also close in on his location. Tom parks behind some bushes, and seeing John and Ramon, he backs into their vehicle, trapping them. John starts shooting at Tom, who returns fire. During the confrontation, Myers spots Tom and begins chasing him. Tom lures Myers into an ambush, and they engage in a struggle. During the fight, Tom accuses John of being guilty and reveals that John attacked Annie. Tom disarms Myers, who urges Tom to turn himself in, promising that justice will be served. However, Tom is determined to handle things his own way. Despite Myers' assurances, Tom throws Ramon's gun at him as proof of his claims and escapes. That night, after staying at a hotel, Tom calls the hospital, where Annie is being treated, and learns that while she can't speak at the moment, she is expected to recover soon. Meanwhile, John heads to the hospital with the intent of ensuring Annie doesn't survive, but he refrains from acting when he sees Myers is present in her room. The following morning, Myers confronts John, questioning him about Tom's story and the whereabouts of the stolen money. Despite John's attempts to conceal the truth, Myers remains suspicious and returns Ramon's gun, instructing both John and Ramon to resume their duties. John remains fixated on his selfish goals, while Ramon is terrified of being discovered by Myers. That night, Tom decides to follow Ramon home. Ramon's wife notices his anxiety and urges him to do the right thing. While keeping his secrets, Ramon tells her that his actions are for her and their children, asking her to remember this if anything happens to him. Suddenly, the sound of the garage door alerts Ramon, and Tom disarms him, urging him to help clear his name. Reluctant to be John's accomplice, Ramon reveals that he secretly stole the warehouse security camera tape from Annie, a fact John is unaware of. He advises Tom to save Annie from the hospital because John plans to kill her. Tom rushes to the hospital, ensures Annie's safety, and sneaks her into his hotel room. The next morning, Tom calls Myers while buying equipment at a hardware store, informing him that Annie is with him and assuring Myers that she is not involved in his plans. Despite Myers' concerns, Tom is determined to carry out his plan. He returns to his hotel room and assembles a bomb. The following day, as Annie recovers, she insists on accompanying Tom. A short distance from John's residence, Tom calls John and demands he confess to his wrongdoing. John threatens Tom and tries to dismiss him, but Tom begins a countdown from 10, warning John of a potential explosion. As the countdown reaches its final moments, John's house catches fire, forcing him to jump out to escape the danger. After the fire, Tom hands Annie the CCTV memory card he obtained from Ramon and asks her to deliver it to Myers. Meanwhile, John reaches his hideout and calls Ramon, urging him to meet at the warehouse. Myers receives the memory card from Annie, who tells him that Tom is a good man. To demonstrate his goodwill, Tom unlocks another storage room, revealing the remaining $6 million. John, armed with 2 guns, prepares for an encounter with Ramon, unaware that Tom is secretly with him. Tom, pretending to take Ramon hostage, confronts John and demands he drop his gun, revealing that he has a security memory card. Furious over Ramon's betrayal, John fights with him and ends up shooting and killing him. John then turns his aggression toward Tom, and a gunfight ensues. John manages to escape with the money, leaving Tom injured. Tom calls John to inform him that he has planted a pressure-sensitive bomb under the seat of John's vehicle. Trapped in his car, John is forced to wait for the police bomb disposal squad. Tom retrieves the tape recording of John's confession from Ramon's body and mourns his death. As John's vehicle is surrounded by Myers and the police, the bomb disposal team discovers that the device is a fake. John, enraged, is arrested by Myers for attempting to steal the money. When Myers returns to his office, he finds an envelope containing the recording, which exposes John as the thief and the murderer of Ramon. Myers meets with Annie and thanks Tom for helping to bring John to justice. Tom, ready to face the consequences of his actions, turns himself in and expresses his desire to become a better person. Myers promises to do what he can to shorten Tom's sentence, recognizing his sincere intent to change.